Braid or Dacron? I've got a lot of questions from people, a lot from my friends about which type of line is better, is whether Dacron's better or Braid is better. These are two completely different types of lines. And you use them for such different applications, so they're almost impossible to compare. But I'm going to tell you guys about when to use these different types of lines and the benefits of them. So I'm going to start off with braid. Braid is a very, very thin diameter line. It's splice line. And it's super, super, super thin. I think like 50-pound braid is equivalent to almost 25-pound monofilament. It's crazy, or 20-pound monofilament is absolutely ridiculous. However, Dacron is thinner, but it's not quite as thin as braid. So I think 50-pound Dacron is equivalent to 30-pound monofilament. So it is slightly smaller. However, it is not as thin as braid. Now, braid you use this for deep dropping and just in general deep water fishing. Braid is very thin. It only has like a maximum of 2% stretch, so you can easily detect really subtle bites in really deep water. So that's why you use braid for swordfish. It's also, however, it tends to slip with knots. So braid is a type of line that likes to slip a lot. So you need to make sure your knots are all cinched down and really tight. Dacron, however, you'd use this to spool your reels as backing for when you're trolling big game reels. For example, you would spool about 700 yards of 80-pound Dacron on a Tiagra 80 wide, and you'd have about 400 or 300 yards of monofilament on top. Now, the great thing about this is over braid when you're trolling is that you do not need to tie a knot in order to attach the monofilament to the Dacron. With the Dacron, it's hollow, so you're able to actually thread monofilament up inside the Dacron, and you can have almost like ridiculous, almost like 10 feet of monofilament actually inside the Dacron. And then where you finish it off is you tie a bunch of half hitches with wax thread, and then that's a knotless join. It's just super strong, and it's basically like a Chinese finger trap. Want the monofilaments inside, it could really never ever come out. So that's the great advantage of using Dacron over braid for trolling gear, is that you have no knots. You're able to get a ton of line on your reels, and also one other thing is that if you use straight monofilament for your reels when you're trolling, if a fish comes up and is much bigger than you actually expected to catch, and it breaks off half your spool, you're screwed, because that reel will be deemed useless until you're able to re-spool that reel completely. With Dacron, it'll most likely only break in the monofilament, and so what you can do is, if the monofilament breaks, you could just rewind on like 300 or 200 yards of monofilament onto the Dacron again. So with Dacron, there's much less chance of you not being able to use that reel again if the fish breaks off while you're fishing. So two completely different lines, but both really good and great for different applications. So for braid, I like to use it for deep dropping and just general bottom fishing, because it's got no stretch and you're able to detect subtle bites. However, this tends to slip a lot more easily with knots, so this is not generally as good for trolling purposes. Whereas Dacron, you don't need to use knots in order to attach monofilament to Dacron. You just thread it through. You can just get that done like a local tackle store. They'll know how to tie that on. And although it's and also one huge benefit to using Dacron instead of braid is that for trolling purposes is that Dacron's almost over half the price of braid. Braid, they'll charge you like 13 cents a yard for good quality braid. This, they'll only charge you maybe 6 or 7 cents a yard. So Dacron for trolling, definitely the way to go if you want to use backing. Much cheaper, zero stretch as well, and you don't need to tie a knot. So if you like this video on braid and Dacron, then hit that like button and then subscribe to my channel. Thanks guys.